Congressman Khanna, thank you very much for joining us. So, all right, we're all living through this. We've got sky-high inflation, brand new numbers out on the economy today. We've got sky-high oil and gas prices, and it's really hurting the American consumer. Who do you blame for those high energy prices?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, gas is $6.50 in my district. First, I blame the Saudis. I mean, they are totally outrageous and ungrateful in cutting production and hurting the American people. I do blame the Fed. They were buying back corporate bonds and mortgages for way too long, printing way too much money. And I blame Putin's war, which has aggravated supply chains, and of course the pandemic, which did that.
Well, very similar to what we're hearing from you now. Last night, the president seemed to place blame everywhere but on his own policies for what we're living through. I mean, you look at some of the very first steps this administration took, Congressman. It was to shut down the building of the Keystone Pipeline. It was multiple messages from this administration that the intention was to go to zero fossil fuel use in this country. So a lot of our refiners shut down capacity. We started shutting down the ability to produce more oil here domestically. So are any of the president's policies to blame for this inflation crisis we're all living through?
Senator, let me just give you the facts on oil production. It is up to almost 12.8 million barrels a day, which is almost at the record levels of 2019, and it will reach record levels of by 2023. The Keystone Pipeline was going to be used to export oil. I have called for a ban on exports of oil. That is about 30% of oil that's being produced that we're sending overseas. That would even increase our supply more. So I believe we have to look at the facts, which is that the Biden oil production is higher than it was in 2020, 2021, and almost at 2019 levels.
But we're also living through a time of low employment, obviously, and soaring demand, unprecedented demand. Unless we can turn that oil into gasoline, it's no use to drivers in this country. You know that. I'm talking about refining capacity was taken offline because the fossil fuel industry was told and demonized and told to shut down that there was going to be this transition to green energy.
No, Sandra, the refining capacity, they weren't investing in that even during the previous administration. The reason is that the big oil companies have given the money in stock buybacks and to Wall Street shareholders. They have not been investing for years in the refining capacity. If we want to have some support for the increase of refining capacity, I'm for that, even in the short term. But the big oil companies, if you ask them, they've got record profits. They're not putting that money in refineries, and they weren't putting that money in refineries in the previous administration.
You're making the point. You're making the point for the refineries. They're not investing because they were told to shut down. They were told that the administration was ending fossil fuels. Here's Brian Deese. Roll the tape. He advises the president.
The only viable path to energy independence for the American economy is to reduce the energy intensity of our economy overall, and ultimately to reduce it to zero and get ourselves to a position where we're no longer reliant on fossil fuels.
Ask anyone from the big oil companies to the mom and pop gas stations in this country. They see this as rhetoric from the White House, demonizing the oil and gas industry in this country, and therefore lack of investment of it and taking offline production and refining capacity to why we are experiencing these sky-high prices. And now it brings us to this moment where Saudi Arabia really sticks it to the United States along with Russia and says we're going to cut capacity. And now we are greatly affected by that because we are not energy independent as we once were in this country, Congressman.
But Sandra, if that were true, then the big oil companies should have been investing in refinery capacity under the Trump administration. But if you look at the statistics, they haven't been investing in it because it has nothing to do with what any president says. It has to do with what Wall Street's been telling them to do, and that is give the money in stock buybacks. Now, if we want to talk about making sure we have enough refining capacity in this country as we are transitioning to meet demand, I believe we can get bipartisan consensus for that, and we certainly can get bipartisan outrage for what the Saudis did. Look, it was President Bush Sr. who defended Saudi Arabia. They wouldn't have a country if he didn't send troops there to defend them against Saddam Hussein. We provide them 70% of the weapons, and there should be bipartisan outrage that while Americans are struggling, they are ungrateful and they are hurting Americans at the pump.
But to that point, is it good that we're relying on Saudi Arabia for oil? Do we want to be in that position?
Well, we've relied on them for decades. We aren't nearly as reliant on them as we used to be.
This is now. This is right now. We're in a position where we're upset because Saudi Arabia, OPEC, is sticking it to us and cutting off oil supplies. I mean, should we be in that position considering the resources that we're sitting on right here domestically?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't, because we should tell the Saudis that we won't give them any weapons, and I guarantee you they would reverse their decision. But secondly, if we had a ban on the export of oil and gasoline, we wouldn't be in that position. Why are we exporting, including to China, while Americans need the help? Those two things would help.
Okay, well, there's a difference in the type of oil that you're talking about. But real quick, the president responded to this, to your plan this morning, Congressman, your Saudi Arabia pitch. Let's listen to what he had to say as he was departing the White House.
Blumenthal and Khanna right now, they're calling for a stopping of U.S. arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Do you support that legislation?
We're going to react to Saudi Arabia, and they're doing consultation when they come back, and we will take action.
He says he's going to consult with them. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I'm pleased I'm learning on Fox News what the president thinks of my legislation, but I'm glad that he is planning to take severe action. I think there have to be consequences. The Saudis are totally dependent on our weapons. Their Air Force couldn't fly without American technicians. We have done so much for them. There need to be consequences. You can't just do this to the American public.
All right. There's so much we could dig into. I wish we had more time, Congressman. We always appreciate you joining us. And if you want to talk stock buybacks, we'll have a conversation about that. And the timing of it was during a pandemic. There's a lot to dig into there. Congressman, we'll have you back very soon. Thank you very much.
Always love being on. Thank you.
Mike.